This time around, I will not have my mask hanging from my face and chewing gum. That was bad. Okay. Speaking of the past, we're going to, I'm just going to kind of recap a little bit about what we've been doing here at Koinonia on Tuesday nights. So we've been going through the book of John since September, and the church, Praise Assembly, is also going through the book of John. And what's really cool is that we get to come here on Tuesday nights and examine the same passages that are preached on Sundays from a different perspective. And the thing about Scripture is that we can read it time and time again and gain new insights and perspectives because His Word is alive and active. And so we're going to slowly digest the life of Christ throughout the rest of this year. And each week we're going to be having a different speaker, just like we did last term. And if you all decide that we're going to try to incorporate some students, so I believe Ashley will be speaking here soon. If any of you guys decide that you want to talk on a Tuesday night, we can make it happen. If you want to do it with a mentor to kind of not be all alone on it, we can make that happen too. But we want to learn from everybody. So we're not going to be going through every single verse of John. We'll be going like chapter by chapter, chunk by chunk. So I recommend that you follow along with the church if you don't have a home church. And even if you do have a home church, just stream it. I mean, if Pastor Joe speaks, the messages will probably be less than 20 minutes, sometimes less than 15 minutes. So pretty easy to incorporate into your weekly schedule. We're also meeting here on Sundays in person too. If you want to meet on church, meet church in person, and you're tired of virtual, if that makes that.
Meet church in person.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. And so also one last plug. Sorry, it sounds like I'm like selling the church. I'm not trying to sell the church. There's an application you can download if you, yeah, an application, an app, a phone app. iTunes. Search Praise Family Monmouth or whatever, and it'll come up. Okay. And if you want to catch up on previous episodes, you can go to the YouTube channel. We stream these Tuesday nights for those who can't make it. Okay, done with all of that. Yeah, there we go. There's the app. Okay, so we left off before December talking about John chapter 6. I spoke about feeding the 5,000 and how God is willing to demonstrate Himself to us if we're willing to participate in that, and how we should retreat from chaos and spend time with our Heavenly Father. Pastor Joe spoke to us about Jesus walking on water and how our fears, sometimes we can't see them, and how we should trust in Jesus because He's got it all under control. Richard talked to us about Jesus being the bread of life and how that can be a hard concept for people to grasp. There will be moments in your life where you'll think that God's plan is wacko, it doesn't make any sense, or it is too hard to follow. And that's why it's important for you to take your spiritual development seriously now, because hard times will come, and if you don't have the answers or you don't know where to turn to, you can easily turn away from God and walk down a different path. So it's important to take your faith seriously, and hard moments will come. But God doesn't tell us that everything will be easy, and He even tells us that people will think His way is wacko. In 1 Corinthians 1, 21 through 24, it says, "For since in the wisdom of God, the world, through its wisdom, did not know Him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. Jews demand signs and Greeks look for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God." So it's like people are going to see Christ crucified as foolishness, but to us it's the power of and wisdom of God. So we're going to pick up in John in the first part of chapter 7. So you can flip there. It's the fourth gospel, the beginning of the New Testament. So I'll be reading verses 1 through 24. After this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He would not go about in Judea, because the Jews were seeking to kill him. Now, the Jews' feast of booths was at hand. So his brothers said to him, "Leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples also may see the works you are doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world." For not even his brothers believed in him. Jesus said to them, "My time has not yet come, but your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify about it and that its works are evil." He's speaking specifically here about what's going to be happening in the feast. He's saying they won't have any issue with you, but they're going to have an issue with me. You go up to the feast. I am not going up to this feast, for my time is not yet fully come. After saying this, he remained in Galilee. But after his brothers had gone up to the feast, he then also went up, not publicly, but privately. The Jews were looking for him at the feast and saying, "Where is he?" And there is much muttering about him among the people. While some said, "He is a good man," others said, "No, he's leading the people astray." Yet for fear of the Jews, no one spoke openly of him. About the middle of the feast, Jesus went up to the temple and began teaching. The Jews therefore marveled, saying, "How is it that this man has learning when he has never studied?" So Jesus answered them, "My teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. If anyone's will is to do God's will, he will know whether the teaching is from God or whether I am speaking on my own authority. The one who speaks on his own authority seeks his own glory, but the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true, and in him there is no falsehood. Has not Moses given you the law? Yet none of you keeps the law. Why do you seek to kill me?" The crowd answered, "You have a demon. Who is seeking to kill you?" Jesus answered them, "I did one work, and you all marveled at it. Moses gave you circumcision, not that it is from Moses, but from the fathers, patriarchs. And you circumcise man on the Sabbath. If on the Sabbath a man receives circumcision, so that the law of Moses may not be broken, are you angry with me because on the Sabbath I made a whole man's body well? Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment." So, my first point that I want to make here is that there's a time and place for everything. Or more specifically, everything needs to take place according to God's timing. Have you ever noticed that when reading the Gospels, how specific Jesus was in demonstrating his divinity to others? Like sharing with them, telling them, don't tell people, or telling the people, go tell people. Like he was very specific about his showing his divinity to others and how that went about. In the past, when we looked at him turning water into wine, was it? I don't know who spoke on that. It doesn't matter. Matt spoke on that. Mary asked Jesus to deal with the wine issue, and he says, "My time has not yet come." His disciples believed in that moment when he did the water into wine, but he didn't necessarily reveal himself to the crowds yet at that point. You guys know the song, "Mary, Did You Know?" You know, that's always the joke. Like, of course she knew. The angel told her. And she asked Jesus to get some more wine for the wedding. So she knew. However, that is still my favorite Christmas song. Well, next to Justin Bieber's Mistletoe. But that's a side note. So Jesus lingered in Galilee because his time was not yet. In verses 4 and 5, even in his brother's disbelief, he chose to wait. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world. Like, just show them. You do it. For even his brothers didn't believe, or for not even his brothers believed in him. So even the people closest to Jesus were like, you should do the miracles, you should do the thing. Because the people that were close to him didn't even believe him fully. And Jesus said, my time has not yet come. I think we ask the same kind of questions as the brothers. We're like, God, why don't you just show up? Why don't you just heal this person of cancer? Why don't you just, I have been super confused, and I have been angry at God, and I have asked him why. I've literally yelled and cried, why, God? Like, what? God has the power to keep us from harm. God has the power to reveal himself plainly to us. So why does he choose to do things the way that he does? Oftentimes, I don't think we are ready to hear or see what he has for us. The timing just isn't right. Other things need to fall into place before we realize why. When reading through the Gospels, take a look at all the instances where it talks about the timing of God revealing himself. I mean, it's pretty crazy just to think, God waited for Jesus to come onto the scene when the Roman Empire was expanding, when people were able to copy manuscripts and send out these letters just so that, the gospel could be preached to the whole entire world and it could be preserved. And that's pretty crazy, God's timing and everything. In John 12:16, it says, a little farther down, 12:16, it says, his disciples did not understand these things at first, but when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered that these things had been written about him and had been done to him. There's so many things that the disciples just didn't understand until later on. The second point that I want to make is that the crowds had different opinions, but didn't demonstrate their favor openly. So Jesus went there in private to kind of scope things out. I believe he did this because he wants us to, he wants to see where we are before making his next move. If the crowds were completely hostile to him, and he was to show face, he would get arrested, and before all of the pieces were into place. It says in verse 1 of chapter 7, he would not go because the Jews were seeking to kill him. But after being there a while, he decided to get up and teach in the temple. I say a lot. My communications professors would be upset with me. So the crowd was torn on their opinions of Jesus. Some people thought he was a good guy. Others thought he was just causing disruption. I think verse 13 is the most interesting here. The ESV says, "Yet for fear of the Jews, no one spoke openly of him." I like the way the NLT puts it because it kind of gives a little more context. That's the word. It says, "But no one had the courage to speak favorably about him in public, for they were afraid of getting in trouble with the Jewish leaders." 6th grade reading level kind of puts it all into place. No one had the courage to speak favorably about him openly because they were afraid of what others had to think and say. And this is kind of like what Richard was talking about in the beginning, is that we have these discipleship groups, and Woo Fellowship is a place where we can openly dialogue and not be afraid of other people's opinions. How often are you afraid to speak up in your classes about your true opinions, or in a group of people because of fear of how they react to your thoughts? Happens to me all the time, some subjects more than others, because y'all know I like to speak my mind a lot of the time on things. But when I choose not to speak my mind, it's often because I feel as if I don't know enough about the particular subject to speak my mind. Like, I don't have a place, If you ever feel this way about the gospel, about God, Jesus, your relationship with him, I want to share with you a passage from 1 Corinthians. It's another passage from 1 Corinthians. I've been reading that with a student, so it's pretty fresh on my mind. So 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 2. It says, "And so it was with me, brothers and sisters, when I came to you. I did not come with eloquence or human wisdom, as I proclaimed to you the testimony of God. For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ, him crucified. I came to you in weakness, with great fear and trembling. My message and my preaching were not with wise and persuasive words, but with a demonstration of the Spirit's power, so that your faith might not rest on human wisdom, but on God's power." Time and time again, God demonstrates that we don't need to have it all put together. There's nothing eloquent about Paul's speech. He could just be humble here in his writing. My speech was not eloquent. Because he's a pretty good writer. I mean, his letters are good. But however, some people are better writers than speakers. But despite all of that, Paul's words here in this text is still true. And they still hold true. We do not have to have all of the wisdom of men to speak God's truth into other people's lives. We can learn from this passage in John here, I think, two main things. That people are going to have thoughts about Jesus that may be contrary to ours. Everybody's going to have their opinions on this guy, and you have to figure out your own opinion if you haven't done that yet. And throughout time, you're going to continue to reevaluate who Jesus is to you. People had different opinions. Some people had good opinions. Some people had bad opinions. However, we can't let the crowd control and rule our thoughts and behaviors. If God has revealed himself to us, we need to hold on to that and not let the world or our family, our friends, or strangers on the internet drag us down from that. And two, God's timing is not necessarily what we think it is. I was kind of thinking about what we were reading and I was talking about, and all of the technical snafus that had happened, and Richard's cars all acting up, and it's like, we don't know why things happen the way they happen, and we could get really frustrated in the moment, but it's like God has a purpose and a plan for everything, and we may just have to rest in him and wait it out and seek his discernment on things, on timing. I think we can also, when it comes to our friends and our family, they may have problems, and we want to just kind of go right in and solve them. But maybe it's not our time to do that. Maybe it's not. We need to be reflective and figure out God's will. So I have a couple questions for our discussion groups. So should we break it? Yeah, let's break it up into two small groups. One group with Richard, just kind of merge the semicircle into two different circles, and then one with Morgan over there. So, I'm Ricard. Remember, you missed the A. Ricard. So, I will put them up on the screen, so that I have to go back there and do that. But here, actually, they're really long. You're not going to be able to do that. They're not like the questions Praise has on. Let me see your phone. I'm going to take a picture of it so you can have it.